Hello, and welcome to Delta Source, your number one source for critical timeline analysis.
Today, we're going to be looking at the timeline of Padme being pregnant with Luke and Leia, and whether or not it makes sense that Anakin did not know Padme was pregnant.
Spoiler alert, it might not, but we'll just have to see.
So, that is our main question. We're looking about this from the framework of why was it a surprise to Anakin that Padme was pregnant in Revenge of the Sith?
Yes.
And so I want to preface this discussion with the statement I prepared. So, the nature of this discussion will frame Padme, a woman, primarily in terms of her ability to create life. And while this is a problematic framing, it is largely caused by the role written for Padme in Revenge of the Sith. Compared to her previous two films, Padme's role as a character was greatly diminished, and she primarily served as a narrative device to motivate Anakin's actions. And so we, two men, recognize this, and we want to acknowledge that Padme's full human experience is not available to us, and that the nature of her pregnancy, as well as knowledge of it, was entirely her own to control.
Yes, absolutely. We're not trying to ruffle any feathers here. She was really underwritten in Revenge of the Sith, frankly, and it
Yeah.
wasn't. It was 20 years ago, but
Oh
still.
no, don't say that.
Oh no, oh no. You know what? You're right. Hey, no excuse. You wrote her as a character. You should keep writing her as a character. I'm gonna get canceled now. No.
Okay. So,
Okay, well, all that aside, let's
yeah.
get into it.
So, I'm gonna set out an outline. Crap. Gonna set out an outline of our discussion here.
Yes.
So, our main question is why was it a surprise to Anakin that Padme was pregnant? So, we've got three objectives in exploring this question. The first objective is we're going to establish details around the pregnancy term. Our second objective is we're going to establish how long Anakin had been away from Coruscant. Our third objective is we're going to establish details around Jedi and sensing unborn life.
Yes.
So that is the general structure this is going to take. So let's go to our first objective, establishing details around the pregnancy term.
Yes.
So our first question here is, were Leia and Luke born prematurely? What do you think about this?
Well, I believe that in cases of twins, they are often born somewhat prematurely, just because fetal development in a mother with two babies rather than one takes up more space. From a
Okay.
practical perspective, which means that if you got two babies growing in there, you're going to need to get them out a little bit sooner.
That is an interesting point and something I had not considered before this. The only thing I had really looked at with this question is that in the film, very clearly these are two full-sized and healthy babies.
True.
But that also kind of comes back to they couldn't film literal newborns.
Right. That's a little, we're dealing with limitations of the film there. So
So that's a good point. Do you? So I didn't actually consider or know that twins were typically born prematurely. Do you have any idea for
actual
how
stats.
long?
Um,
Like weeks, a
yeah,
month, days?
about a month early. Generally, is
Interesting.
how that'll go. Sometimes even
Interesting.
more than that. More than half are apparently born before 37 weeks.
That
Of all
okay.
twins. Yes.
That's very interesting data. And it's going to be very important for this discussion. So I'm glad you know that.
Yeah, no
Uh,
problem. Not that I'm like a baby expert, but I think I read that somewhere once, and I've kind of just anyway.
so with that in mind, I think moving forward, we will probably just call it 8 months, maybe, for the full
Sure,
term.
sure. That seems reasonable.
Okay. So, regardless of how accurate that actually is for the intents of our discussion here, we're going to frame it as 8 months. So, next question.
Yes.
How far into the pregnancy was. Oh, wait, I switched these questions up. Uh, Second question:
Yes.
how much time does the movie span?
How long in Revenge of the Sith? And I don't know if we've ever gotten like an exact answer to that. To be honest, I would estimate maybe a month tops. Probably more like a couple of weeks.
That's kind of what I thought as just my naive guess. Um,
Uh,
what I always like to do is go back to the film and see what I can get directly from the film itself. And what I got from the film, counting day-night cycles on Coruscant, which,
mhm.
correct me if I'm wrong, Coruscant is both galactic standard time and it is basically the same as Earth days, 24
Yes,
hours.
those things are both correct. It's 24, 365. I'm fairly certain on Coruscant, and that is the galactic standard.
So, counting the times that we saw it was day, and then it was night, and then it was day again,
Mm-hmm.
the minimum amount of time that passes in Revenge of the Sith is 5 days.
Okay, fair enough. Day to night. Yeah, I guess there's really no way to argue with that. And it could have obviously been more,
Yeah.
I suppose. Well, we know that Obi-Wan traveled from Coruscant to Utapau,
Yes.
uh,
And
which
back.
that and back. That is, oh yeah, yeah. There's a lot of back and forth there. And while it's true that Star Wars travel times are always kind of vague, and deliberately so, I would think. Um, I'm wondering if we could from that perhaps garner. I don't know how much exactly we should base off of that because the movies don't really ever treat travel distance as, they travel at the speed of plot mostly in
Yes.
Star Wars films. So I don't know if we want to rely on that too much. Uh,
So, yeah, like I said, this is the minimum, but I don't think it's realistically 5 days. I think probably the minimum, absolute minimum realistic time that the movie spans is 1 week. Probably more like what you were saying earlier, like 2 weeks. Maybe if we want to
mm-hmm.
stretch it, a month. But we have to, like, infer or assume a lot of stuff to be able to fill in the gaps and say that they were doing things off screen in between all the scenes.
Yes, I would say that's definitely true. And I don't know if the novelization maybe gives a different or better idea of the timeline because I honestly haven't read it in a bit.
I am about halfway through the novelization right now, and it's really not addressing that very much.
Oh, well, fair enough. All
Yeah.
right then.
Um, so I think for our purposes, we should maybe go with the realistic but still generous time span of 2 weeks from beginning to end of Revenge of the Sith.
Okay, 2 weeks, sure, sure.
Um, if you had to like put a gun to my head and ask how many days do I think it is, I don't think it's 2 weeks. But for the purposes of calculations, we'll go with 2 weeks. So we're dealing with 8 months pregnancy term and 2 weeks movie time.
Right.
So now question three: how far into the pregnancy was Padme at the start of the movie?
And that one's also hard because she does not look pregnant at the beginning of that movie, and she looks quite pregnant by the end of it.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you
Yeah.
said that because my spouse said the same thing. And that prompted
Oh,
me to go through all the scenes Padme is in and get some screenshots so that we can actually examine this feeling that she looks more pregnant at the end than at the beginning. Because that's also the
mm-hmm.
general sentiment I've always had. But I
Yes.
didn't know if that was just an impression or if that was actually real. So let's look at these screenshots now. So, first one. This is Padme on the balcony. Anakin says, "You're so beautiful. It's only because I'm so in
I'm so in
love."
love
No,
with you.
actually, it's because
Yeah.
I'm so in love with you. So love has
Love
blinded
has
you.
blinded you.
A real Shakespearean
Not exactly what
masterpiece.
I meant. My wife and I quote that back and forth to each other all the time. Very romantic.
So if you look at this, you can see the nightgown is pretty much going out. I don't want to say indefinitely. That sounds wrong, but it's a pretty noticeable angle outward.
That is true. Yes.
So this is the earliest glimpse that we actually get at Padme's baby belly. We don't really see it whenever they're
When they're first meeting
convalescing
in
behind
the
the pillar.
hallway.
Yeah,
Right, which is, oh, by the way, kind of not maybe the best position to be doing that in when like his
really.
boss is just about 30 feet away from
Yeah.
close to that. Yeah, but whatever.
Okay, so that's the first look we get at how
Yes.
pregnant Padme looks. All right,
Yes.
next one. Oh, come on, Streamlabs hotkeys. Move on to the next picture already. Oh boy, this is fun.
Oh
Uh,
no. Difficulties. Please stand by.
yes, technical difficulties. Please stand by. Let me try something else. I'm gonna set a static image source to change between the pictures. That's what I'll do. Thank you guys for hanging with us while we solve problems.
While we're waiting, I found a little chart that has the base travel time in hours of traveling to various regions in Star Wars, presumably from like a role-playing game supplement or something, which, debatable canonicity, but going from a core world like Coruscant to an outer rim world like Utapau could take around 96 hours,
Oh,
according to this
interesting.
chart, which is, what is it, like 10 days?
96, 72 hours is 3 days, so
My math is
96
so
would
bad.
probably be
Never
4.
mind. 4 days. Wow, good job, Paul. Okay, it's been a bit since I've. Wow, that's you know what?
That's. Hmm.
4 days. So 8 days back and forth from Utapau and back. In other words,
What about Mustafar?
and Mustafar is it's also an outer rim world, so it should be a fairly similar travel time.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, I think 2 weeks actually sounds more realistic, and it's not like the upper limit generous. So maybe
Yeah,
2 to 3 weeks.
maybe 2 or 3 weeks, maybe almost a month. Yeah.
Okay,
Which
okay.
yeah, yeah.
And what was your source for that?
There is a there's a chart from like one of the role playing game source books, which I found online. I can actually message it to you in the Discord if you'd like, and you can well, if you can get images to do anything that you want them to do. But I'll send it to you in the Discord chat, and you can take a look at it and decide if you want to try
Yes,
and,
go ahead
and
and
do
send
it or
it
not.
to me, and we'll pull that up in the end when we're doing our final conclusions.
I also found a website someone made called Astrogation Computer, which is supposed to let you plug in like where you want to go and what hyperspace class you have, and it'll just tell you.
Oh my god.
However, I think it might be using Flash or something because it doesn't look like it works anymore.
Ooh, that
But
hurts.
I'll send you a link to that as well if you would take a look at it.
Okay.
I haven't been able to get it to work yet.
I can probably download the SWF file and do it in a Flash player. Anyway,
All right. Well, anyway.
so I've got pictures to do what I want. So let's move on to screenshot number 2.
Okay.
This is, presumably a day or two after the balcony scene. This is where Anakin is saying, "There's something wrong. I'm not the Jedi I should be. I want to be more, but I know I shouldn't."
Oh yes, classic scene.
Um, and Padme is wearing this, black dress, and we get a nice side view. And honestly, I think that's almost the same amount. I don't think her size has really progressed much at this
No,
point.
not. It looks about the same, really. From though, and the dress, the little nightgown might have been more billowy as well than the black dress.
That's a
So,
good point.
and she was outside in the
Yeah.
wind though obviously she was really on a soundstage, and I don't know that they bothered to.
They did not blow wind. I was watching very
No.
close.
Okay, well, fair enough.
Yeah. Okay, so on to screenshot 3. This is after the attack on the Jedi Temple. Anakin has come and gone, where he said, "The Jedi have betrayed the Republic. My loyalties lie with the Chancellor." And then he flies off. 3PO, you can see, is poised to say his heartbreaking line where he's like, "I feel so helpless." We don't really... You can't really get a good look at the curve of her belly because her arm is in the way, but it doesn't seem substantially larger than before.
No, hasn't changed much. I don't think.
Okay, on to the next one. And the next one is, we're on Mustafar.
Yes.
And on Mustafar, we don't really get a good close up or side view of Padme's belly. The best we get is when she's running from the ramp down to Anakin, but it kind of moves too fast to really see much there.
Right.
So we get this front view while Anakin is choking her, and then we get a close up whenever she is on the ground. And in both cases, we don't really get a clear look at exactly how big she looks. Um,
Right.
so what I get from all this, what I conclude, is that the idea that she looks more pregnant at the end of the movie than at the beginning, I think we all made that up in our heads.
Huh. Yeah, that's a good point. Because I mean, in the very first scene, we don't really notice much, but from the balcony scene onward, she looks slightly pregnant. You know,
Yeah.
more or less, and that hasn't really changed much by the time she gets to Mustafar. I mean, mm, yeah, yeah. You know what? Maybe that's just my memory being bad.
I think it's one of those
Uh,
things
uh,
where, as we consider the story after we've watched the movie, we think, well, of course, time has passed. She gave birth at the end, so she must be at the end of term at the end, but at the beginning, she must have not been pregnant enough for Anakin to see it at a glance. But
right.
I really think that's just our brains trying to make sense of things versus what's actually, to me, it looks like they made a
There, yeah.
single, pregnant belly prosthetic for Natalie Portman to wear, and they didn't make it bigger throughout filming.
Which is kind of an oversight on their part, if I'm honest. But on the other hand, I guess they weren't expecting weird nerds 20 years later to be like super duper duper looking at it real
I
close.
told
Which
you to
George
stop
Lucas
saying
usually.
20 years.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, 18 years ago. Is that better? No, that's actually almost worse. Um, when they made it, I don't think they were expecting the fans to be quite this. But then again, they probably should have been expecting that because it is
Yeah,
Star Wars.
they really
And
should have.
yeah, if you weren't expecting that, George, you should have been.
So, question: how far into the pregnancy was Padme at the start of the movie? I think, I don't know, at most T minus 1 month from delivery. So we could say
Which,
7 months, given that we're
sure,
assuming delivery was at 8 months.
sure. And if it took place over the course of almost a month, which with travel times and days and nights, that's probably close to right.
Yeah,
Yeah, all right, so fair enough. I think we've nailed that down as well as we can with the material that we have available.
I agree. So let's move on to our second objective: establishing how long Anakin has been away from Coruscant.
Yes.
And this is where I am going to rely on your insight and research,
Timeline research.
because all I
Yeah.
have is that in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, whenever they are reuniting at the Senate, behind a pillar 30 feet away from Mace Windu and all the other senators, Padme says, 5 months. 5 months? How could they do that to us? So this seems to imply that whatever was the duration of Anakin's campaign in the Outer Rim, it has been 5 months since Padme last saw him, whether they saw each other on Coruscant or whether she left Coruscant and met him somewhere else. It's been 5 months since they'd seen each other, according to the
Yeah.
novelization.
According to the
So,
novelization, right.
my first question is: are there any EU materials that indicate the duration of Anakin's campaign in the Outer Rim?
Yeah, so here's what I've managed to nail down with that. Um Wikipedia explicitly says the Outer Rim sieges, which is the conflict they're referring to with the 5 months in the Outer Rim and all that, began 2 years and 6 months after the Battle of Geonosis, and 6 months before Revenge of the Sith.
Okay,
And then
okay.
lasted for 6 months. So, um, what that means is that, and that was when he was deployed to the Outer Rim, and they would not have been able to see each other
Yeah.
very easily, presumably. Uh, I'm pretty certain that the source that they have for that comes from that novelization. However,
Interesting.
I'm pretty sure that's where they get the months on that, because I don't think there were a lot of books or comics that really specifically got into month to month.
Yeah.
Star Wars timelines are generally done by the year,
Right.
and the other problem with that is the Clone Wars' timeline has gotten real weird ever since 2008. Mostly
Yeah.
because the TV show is part of Legends technically, but
Somehow.
the TV show somehow, right? It doesn't really. It maybe shouldn't be. I don't think that fits in Legends all that well, because there was already so much stuff about the Clone Wars that came out in books from like '02 to '05.
Yeah.
Books and comics and video games and all that. And now we're trying to cram all this other stuff in here, and it just doesn't quite fit. Uh, what we do know is that, so in the Clone Wars cartoon, the one from the 2D animated one from '03,
Yes.
the battle where there's a guy on a in a fortress and he says, "Oh, they only sent 2 Jedi."
Oh yeah.
I bet they're
Yeah.
gonna have to send a whole army. No, they only sent 2 Jedi. That is the first battle of the Outer Rim sieges, which Obi-Wan and Anakin
Oh.
participated in,
Yeah.
apparently. Um, so that
I
would have
like that
taken
scene.
which was, and we know that that was the first battle that he was in after he became a knight, because we
Yeah.
see the knighting ceremony
Right.
before that, and when he was a knight he must have been on Coruscant, because we see him in the temple getting knighted, or when he
Yes.
got his braid cut off. So we can extrapolate at least that he must have been on Coruscant about 6 months before Revenge of the Sith.
Okay. Okay. All right. This is the course of this is going different than what I expected. The way our calculations are being pushed.
It
So
definitely is. I definitely, these are facts that I was not. They're lining up weirdly for sure.
so with this in mind, we decided at the start of Revenge of the Sith, Padme is approximately 7 months into the pregnancy. I would give that a margin of error of 2 weeks. So we could say, like 7 or 7.5 months into the pregnancy. Now, if we say minus, so with the two numbers we have being either 5 months gone or 6 months gone, we'll say 5.5 months.
Okay.
So 7.5. Hold on. Okay, I'm doing like a double range or something. um, if it's 7.5 minus 5, then it would be 2.5. And if it's
Okay.
7, no, wait, hold on. Welcome to Delta Source, where I struggle to do math even though I have a math degree.
I was gonna say, at least you beat me on the hours to days conversion, at least.
7.5 months minus 6 months is 1.5 months. Okay, that's our lower range.
Yes. No.
It'd be 1 month. That's our lower range. 7.5 minus 5.5 is 2. There we go. So with this in mind, Padme was between 1 and 2 months pregnant when they last met. There we go.
Okay.
I got the
Okay.
range. Alright, so that concludes objective number 2. Anakin had been away for either 5 or 6 months, and so that means Padme was either 1 to 2 months pregnant when they last met.
Yes.
Alright,
Which means, yeah. Okay. There we go. Yeah.
so third objective, and this is where I'm relying again on your knowledge of EU and, all of the stuff that happened. Presumably much of this comes from post Return of the Jedi, but I guess it could come from anywhere on the timeline. Establishing details around Jedi and sensing unborn life. So,
Right.
first question, probably obvious, but we gotta ask it. Can Jedi sense unborn life? And also, I just want to make another preface or disclaimer statement. With unborn life, I wasn't sure what was exactly the best way to phrase that, and I don't mean to make any kind of political statement with that. That's just how
Yeah,
I'm
we're not
trying to
touching that.
refer to, things that have not been born yet, such as human embryos and whatnot. So, can
Yes.
Jedi sense unborn life?
The answer to that question is absolutely. There's plenty of evidence of that going all the way back to even the Thrawn trilogy, where it talks about Leia, sensing her twins.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
yeah.
And I've read that. I guess I could have answered that for myself. But anyway, yeah,
Yeah, but I'm the expert here, so you ask me the questions. Understand?
exactly. So question 2: how easy or difficult is it compared to sensing fully born beings?
uh, that so not being a Jedi and extrapolating based on information that comes up in the books. I would say that it is probably well, one. It's going to depend on whether or not the unborn life is force sensitive.
Okay.
And here's where we get into weird stuff about midichlorians and like because there's the argument of well anyone can become a Jedi with training, and then there's versus well no you've got to have a certain amount of midichlorians in order to be able to do it, and then we get into sort of the back and forth of is the force genetic to a certain extent, and we're not trying to touch any controversies with this either. I want to point out this
Yeah.
is all fictional, very fictional. Unless you actually happen to be force sensitive, in which case, let me know. If there's any of you out there, I'm very interested in that.
Our
Um,
email is delta source at... I actually don't remember if we have an email.
oh,
Anyway, go ahead.
well, if we don't, we'll get one, and we'll let you know. Yeah, if you happen to actually be a Jedi, we'd love to talk with you, or even just like an unaligned force user.
Yeah.
Uh, Anyway, is it more difficult to sense if Jason and Jaina, Leia's Jedi twins, were quite force sensitive as you might expect?
Yeah.
And it's generally easier for force sensitive people to sense other force sensitive people, because it's sort of like active radar, right?
Yeah.
Versus. They're kind of all reaching out with theirs, and you can also block the force if you're force sensitive. You can like kind of shut yourself off, so it's harder to be sensed
Yeah.
as well. But the answer to that question is, and of course, Luke and Leia are force sensitive.
Yeah.
We know
They're
that to
they're
be
both
the case.
they both have natural innate power in the force. So they're
Yes,
going to be
quite a bit.
broadcasting pretty strongly.
Right, and they're not going to know how to not do that. Being feeble, I guess. They're not
Fetal
going to know how to have
people.
mental discipline. Right. So, however, if it's someone who's not force sensitive, it might be more difficult to sense them. And I would think it is probably going to be easier to sense people who have been born versus sensing uh, fetuses.
Yeah.
But I don't know that, and I don't really know that they've ever really gone into much
Okay,
detail about that.
going back to the Thrawn trilogy with Leia sensing the twins.
Yes.
Because I do remember that being in the books, but how soon was that? Was it or the first time we have it described in the books, was it like after these are formed infants in her womb that are kicking, or was it like when they were lumps of cells really early?
It when the story opens, she is already somewhat pregnant and has been for a bit.
Okay.
So it's definitely not early phases of the pregnancy. It is. I'm trying to remember exactly because the twins are actually born at some point uh during the events of the books.
Yeah.
Born in 9 ABY, and the series starts in like it probably starts in like 8 then, wouldn't it? I guess that would make. Let me double check that actually very very quickly.
Okay.
Make sure that I am not messing up my dates here. The Thrawn campaign
I'm
started in
also
9 ADY, and yes, the Thrawn campaign took place over a year, so she was already, or less than a year, I guess. She was already pregnant when it started and gave birth partway through it.
okay. So, yeah, okay. So the example we have with Leia is already pretty well developed infants inside.
Yes.
So we may have already sort of covered this, but question 3: could unborn life be sensed without directed effort? And I feel like this answer is probably no.
I, yeah, I don't know. how likely you'd be to just notice something like that if you weren't thinking about it.
And especially okay, coming back to midi-chlorians, everyone's favorite topic. I don't mind it because I
Yeah.
grew up with it, but you know, developmental stages of a human baby. At some point, it's a lump of cells. At a later point, it has a heart. At a later point, it has a brain. I actually don't
Right.
know exactly what is the flow of all those things, but at
Yeah,
some
I'm not
point,
an
it does
expert,
not
but
have a formed brain. At a later point, it does have a formed brain.
Right.
And presumably, I would think this is a big red flag. This is conjecture. Midi chlorians and a connection to the Force probably does not start happening until after there's a brain, or
I
at
would
least a
say
heart.
that that's probably true. They live in your blood, I guess, but like at what point do you start to develop blood as a fetus?
Probably. Again, okay, big conjecture. Yeah, like I said, towards the beginning, we're two men. We're cisgender heterosexual men. We don't know squat about the mechanics of
Uh,
pregnancy.
Blood cells are developed as early as the seventh day of embryonic life, apparently.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Like, probably there has to be some kind of circulation even attached to, but before a heart develops, there's probably circulation coming from interface with the mother. So
Yes, I
midichlorians
would
flow
say that's true.
through an embryo, like, pretty much from the start. But as far as being a conscious being with a connection to the Force, I think that's still probably safe to say it's not until there's a brain.
I would say that's probably true.
Since you seem to have Google open looking up facts about pregnancy, can you look at like when the brain starts to develop?
Yes. Fetuses develop brains around week 5 to 7.
Week
It looks
5.
like.
Okay, okay. This is good stuff. All right, this is taking us. We've completed our third objective. We're on to the conclusion now.
Yes, I think we're actually all right. Look at us. We're figuring stuff out.
Does it make sense that Anakin did not know Padme was pregnant? So we said that, or we concluded that Padme was between 1 and 2 months pregnant when they last met, and
Yes,
5 to 7 weeks falls within that.
that is
So,
true.
brains could be developing in 5 to 7 weeks between 1 and 2 months. So what this leaves me with feeling is that it is inconclusive, but entirely possible that Anakin could not sense Padme being pregnant when they last met before he went to the Outer Rim sieges.
I would definitely say, well, yes. I don't think we have a plot hole here. I do think it's a possibility that he might have just not uh noticed, I guess.
What I was thinking as I was preparing my notes and research for this is that Padme would have been 4 months pregnant and would have, it would have been like, there's no way, first, that she did not know, and second, that Anakin could not sense it. But the fact that all of our number crunching, so to speak, has pushed the
Yeah.
date back this far, it makes a lot more sense that Anakin could not have just accidentally sensed two babies forming
Two
inside of
babies.
her.
Right, right.
Um, what do you think about that?
I think that's definitely a reasonable conclusion to come to. I would say that there's another factor which we do need to consider as well, which is that we know from dialogue in Attack of the Clones and later, the Jedi's ability to sense things is being clouded uh,
Yes.
because Palpatine is trying to darken their visions so that he can, kill them all, basically. And that's another reason why he chose to kick off the Clone Wars, is
Yes.
because being surrounded by death and people dying on a galactic scale, dying by the millions every day, I feel like that level of pain and suffering can also cause like just a. I feel like it would just be like screaming in your head in the background constantly, as you're
Oh
trying
yeah.
to do things. If you're or you either shut yourself off to it or you just have to deal with it all of the time. And I imagine that would be very distracting. if you were trying to sense something precise, or especially if you weren't looking for it, which I don't think he was.
Yeah. So, all right. I think with that in mind, it's tilted not even just from possible, but likely that Anakin would not have been able to sense them unless he was trying.
Yes, and I don't think he would have been trying because he was not expecting her to be pregnant, particularly because, well, I don't know what sort of if they were using birth control or what they were doing with that. I have no idea. And I doubt we'll ever really get the
Yeah.
hot and spicy details on that because I don't think Disney would have be brave enough to fully explore the realities of birth control usage in the Star Wars setting.
um. Now, beyond that, with our established timeline that Padme was between 1 and 2 months pregnant whenever they left, given the level of medical technology available, I do feel like there is no way that Padme did not know that she was pregnant at the time. But as I said in the preface at the beginning of the episode, that was her information to control.
Yeah, it was her business, and she probably didn't think he needed to know. Which fair enough.
And it's a time of war. You don't want to burden him with something like that, and then he was
Right,
gone for so long. So
right.
I don't want to cast any shade at Padme or in any way
No.
imply that she was wrong in not telling him until so late in the game.
Right. She made her decision and she was right about it. Well, I guess she was right about it. It all ended really badly anyway, but I doubt him knowing sooner would have changed that.
Yeah, it might have just, he would have been so distracted he might have left the Outer Rim sieges. Who knows what would have happened
Yeah.
to the
Or
war?
left the order. That could have been really bad. Or, well, I don't know if it would have been
You've
bad. It
made a
would have been
commitment
different
to the
for
Jedi
sure.
Order, not easily broken. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway.
exactly. Exactly.
So this is our conclusion. It does make sense that Anakin didn't know. It's a surprise to me. I think based on your spoiler warning from the beginning, it's a surprise to you. But
It is. I was fully expecting
yeah,
it to be like, this is dumb, but looking at the timing of it and knowing what we know, uh, that's assuming that Star Wars humans have a gestation period of 9 months, which
I feel like
they
we
probably
we don't need
do.
to get into that because
Yeah.
seemingly in all aspects, Star Wars humans are identical to regular humans.
Somehow, yes, they're basically the same.
Yeah,
Which all right. Well, that's definitely a topic for another day, though. We can get into origins of species and what is it? Convergent evolution
yeah,
or
convergent
something like
evolution.
that. Uh,
Well, this has been Delta Source, your number one source for two dumb guys learning about pregnancy from Google. And until next
uh,
time, may the force be with you.